So okay, can everybody still hear?
Yep.
Okay, well, we have Mark and Andy with us. Thank you again, guys, and some couple of owners, or just one owner?
Three.
Three, okay. Can you help me with those, Gary?
Diana Dietrich is here in the room, and Kathy Balthazar and Dan Noonan are online.
Okay, excellent.
Kelly Balthazar.
Kelly, I'm sorry, Kelly.
That's
I
all right.
apologize.
It happens all the time, oddly
I'll
enough.
slap me silly next time you see me. Everybody
Well,
else does.
And thank you guys for being there. Of course, we also have Joe Carey, who's our treasurer and past president, and Eric Tibbetts, who is past president, and see Ron, who is currently on the board. I think that accounts for everybody, does it not?
Jerry Q2's on there
Oh,
too.
Jerry's on?
Yep.
Okay, good. So another board member.
And
So-
Dan, yeah.
Oh, what's that?
Did you mention Dan Noonan?
Yes, I think
Yeah,
Gary,
okay,
Gary
all right.
did, yeah. Well, I hope everybody got to review. We didn't have any outside reading this time, essentially, but besides the little summary we did called board functions. And then, but there was references to looking over some policies that we have on file, and also Exhibit B, which to the DCCRs, which is really the explanation of how the assessments are calculated. So previously we've talked about history, we've talked about legal matters and legislation, but tonight we're really talking more about nuts and bolts of how the Taco Board operates. And we're lucky to have two resident experts with us. Our treasurer, who's been around a long time. and you know, I do look up to him as an elder. He's my elder, and I
By 2 days.
and then also, as we get into the there's a section in the writing tonight about the asset replacement policy, and of course the driving force to get our asset replacement policy in place and to get it applied and get it published and actually do the work is Eric Tibbetts, who's damn near as old as I am, as I recall.
Not by a long shot, several months. Jeepers, we all the same age.
So anyway, we were lucky to have them, and they're gonna hopefully have a few things to say. In fact, the first thing that comes up on the board functions document is budget development and administration. And I forewarned Joe that at this point I was gonna ask him to reflect, since he's probably, well, not just probably, he undoubtedly has had the most experience of all of us in preparing with and dealing with the budget. So Joe, if you would care to make a few remarks in terms of your perspective on Taco's budgeting process, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, I've been involved in developing and implementing and managing the budget probably pretty much every year since 2006, I believe, was the first year I got heavily involved in it. So what's that, 16 years or so, something like that. Yeah, the taco budget is not a small item. We're almost a $3 million a year operation. Anecdotally, we're the largest HOA in Southwest Colorado. We both in terms of number of units and our annual budget cash flow that flows through the association. We operate on a fiscal year from January 1st through December 31st, calendar year. We begin the annual budget process shortly after the annual meeting in September. At that point, it's been my habit, if you will, to begin to put together the spreadsheets, the worksheets, consult with our staff, consult with the board, consult with people who will have involvement in various line items of the budget. And then this is about a 6 to 8 week process, and that culminates with the board meeting that we typically hold it's been late October to early November, and the main item on that agenda for that board meeting is the discussion of the finalization of and the voting on the budget to be submitted to the owners for their review and ultimate approval by default. Approval happens to the budget when there's in the absence of a protest of the budget. So in the bylaws, Article 10 of our bylaws covers that. If any of you, especially our candidates, I advise you to review that article so you're familiar with it. Yeah, that's pretty much covers the budget process. The following meeting in February, generally in January or February, is when the budget is ratified in the absence of a protest on the part of the owners. And in the last 16 years that I've worked on it, we've never had one of those. So the process has gone pretty smoothly on that. That's about it. I don't know if the candidates might have any questions about the budget. John, would anything you think I might not have covered there?
Well, one thing that I don't think we've ever had a problem with, I believe there's a parameter that exists in the bylaws that constrains the board in terms of how much of an increase in the budget can occur year from year. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's actually in the covenants, in the DCCRs, and it's 15% is the limit. And of course, we've never reached that or even come close to it.
And another thing that I think is worth noting is that there's actually not a great deal of discretionary, or let's put it this way, after certain items in the budget are calculated or they're realized, how much, quote, wiggle room, so to speak, does the board have year to year, Joe, in if it wants to do something different?
Generally, most of the wiggle room is in the capital projects budget. The operations budget, there's not a lot of wiggle room at all. And that part of the budget is close to $2.5 million. So I would say on a percentage basis, 15% maybe is flexible. Gives the board has discretion on what to include and what not to include. When it comes down to things like insurance, utilities, staff salaries, property upkeep, landscaping, that's going to cost what it's going to cost. You can work with it in terms of, trying to go about accomplishing those things in a more cost-effective way. And we always do that. I mean, we do our due diligence, we shop our insurance, we look for ways to streamline. But it's the capital projects budget, which may include, for instance, for example, this year in the capital projects budget, there's things like, let me get there. I'm working on two computers here. So things like mitigation of bat infestation, replacing major items, like for instance, there's a fire suppression pump that's in the budget this year. We always put about $25,000 in the budget for what we call unplanned capital expenses. And these are things that you just don't know are going to happen until they do. And we always use up that money for things. You don't know what you don't know, and things might come up. Let's see, what else have we got? Oh, and then contribution to reserve, which is a discretionary amount. So we can decide within that capital, we put it within that capital expense budget, because that's where that money eventually goes, is to capital projects or long-term projects. So things like, so the amount that we might earmark towards putting into capital reserves becomes part of that budget. And again, it's only about, it varies between, I've seen it vary between $250,000 and $450,000 a year. So you can do the math out of a $3 million budget. That's where the wiggle room is.
Yeah. How much do we have in reserve now?
Our permanent reserves right now sit at $820,000, and our current budget with puts and takes.
Joe, I think you just went silent.
Lips are still moving.
Can anybody else hear Joe?
No.
Joe,
No.
nobody can hear you.
John, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear everybody but Joe.
Okay. We might want to move.
Hopefully Joe got most of it said. So, I was hoping maybe he might be able to stand for questions, and maybe we'll get this figured out.
No, still can't hear you.
John, I can comment a little bit on the budget. in
Yeah,
the
please do, Jerry.
Long-term asset replacement, which I think Eric's going to talk about more.
Right.
Yeah, so as Joe said, every year in the budget process that determines how much to allocate to go into increase our reserves, which are, by the way, required by law by Kiowa. And back in 2015, when I was treasurer, we began taking some of those reserves, most of it, in fact, and putting it into vehicles that would return interest to the association. So we established a CD ladder chain that was started in 2015 and 2016. And then Joe has expanded it since then. So we're getting return on our reserves that are above and beyond what we could get from a regular savings type account.
Well, good. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. And that's true. That occurred during your tenure, and I believe you really came up with the first iteration of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. And there were other people, Joe included, who were involved in getting that established, and worked out well.
Yeah, no question. Before we lost Joe, one more question I was going to ask him was, because he said he's been involved in the financing of the preparation of the budget and administration of the budget since maybe as early as '06. And certainly he's been treasurer off and on for quite a number of those years. And I was going to ask him, and I think he first became president of the board, maybe in late, like '09 or something like that. No? 06? Okay. And I guess maybe joking through hand gestures, how much reserve did we have when you were first president? Is that a 0? Well, those are leading questions, but I think it's important that owners know that it hasn't been that long ago that Taco had 0 in reserve. And it has been through the dedicated work of a number of people on the board, and particularly treasurer, that we've been able to build that up to $800,000. And frankly, my personal opinion, I wish it could go a little bit higher. But anyway, does anybody want to, especially the candidates, anybody have any questions?
There's a question in the chat, John. Kelly is asking, I remember reading something about the long-term capital improvement plans windows. Can you speak to how the specific project decisions are determined and maybe remind us of what's coming down the pike?
Okay, if I understand the question, in terms of long-term asset planning, is that how does the board make those decisions? Is that the gist of the question?
Kelly, you've got to unmute yourself.
Sort of. So when you make these large scale capital improvements, how do you determine what projects to take on and when? And then if you can remind us what you do have sort of in the plans, because I vaguely remember y'all were thinking about redoing windows in 2023.
Okay, I'm going to call on Eric to comment on that, because I think he probably knows more about the asset replacement plan than the rest of us.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yes, again, we'll talk about this in just a minute in a little more detail, but basically through the manager of our maintenance department over the last several years, we have annually reviewed every asset on our property that Taco owns that has a replacement value of $1 million or more. So we don't worry about a $10,000, item, but anything that's a significant amount of money and we believe needs to be planned for and financially planned for. And then we have a list in a big spreadsheet, which is posted on the website, that would tell you what that asset is, where it's located, the approximate time it needs to be replaced, and the approximate replacement cost. And
do you want me to share this screen with everybody or no?
Sure, it's 7:15. I think we can, again, Gary, do you want to walk through how you got there first and then put the spreadsheet up?
Sure. Let me do this. If you go to the website, go to HOA documents, and let me, I can't get there from here. Well, we'll do it this way. Go to our website, go to HOA documents, and then in the center column with the top group, there's the 2020 asset replacement worksheet, and 2020 is when it was revised. And there you will find all the things that Eric is talking about. The years that they're going to be replaced, what they are, et cetera, et cetera.
So again, these are high value items that have a multi-year life. And what we're trying to do is make sure that when the comes time to replace a parking lot or replace another given asset, replace an elevator in the lodge, a couple of very relevant examples, that we have the money in hand or we have a plan to put that money aside between now and the day the bill comes due. Make sense? Follow-up question?
Well, Eric, short of having the money in hand or a plan to have the money when we need it, what would be the alternative to that if a major expense was needed and we didn't have the money in reserve?
Well, of course, the first thing is we would be in violation of our board policies. So that's never a good thing. Having said that, the first line of defense, I guess, and I thought maybe it would come up in the reserve discussion. The association does own 2 condominium units here in the property. Those are currently in a rental pool. Those 2 could be sold. And in fact, Joe is absolutely correct on the number of dollars in our reserves, but I would argue that the market value, maybe less some selling commission, of those 2 properties are also reserves of this association. And if we had an unplanned expense of significant proportions, say $1 million, I think the board would have to think very hard about maybe liquidating one or both of those loan units.
Uh-huh.
The other thing, and Joe, you can do a thumbs up or thumbs down on this if you want. But if we have expenses that come up for which we do not have the reserves, we can also, the board.
Jerry, I think you just muted yourself. Joe, we still can't hear you.
Sorry, okay, yeah, and thanks, Gary. I'm not sure how that happened. So 2 other options that we have to come up with money for expenses that we don't have reserves to cover. One is special assessments. And I don't want to go into all of that, but that can happen. It's not part of our regular assessment program, but for non-regular kinds of things, special assessments are an option. The other thing that we can do, and we have done, in fact, is to borrow money. I believe when we were setting up the restaurant, I think we may have borrowed some money. The restaurant set up, we had a short-term loan, or at least we were considering it. I don't remember now exactly how that worked out, but borrowing money is also an option. Of course, you don't like to do that if you don't have to, but that's a possibility.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, I absolutely do agree with Jerry there. The thing I thought you were implying, John, was a major capital expenditure. We do not have the ability to go and borrow $1 million. We could certainly borrow 1/10 of that or something in that neighborhood. But if we had a major expenditure, borrowing is, we could borrow a little of it, but we certainly couldn't borrow all of it.
Right. And, I think it's generally, it's a general opinion of probably all owners and certainly board members. One thing you just hate to do is have to go to special assessment. That is never a happy experience. And luckily we've been able to avoid that so far. Now that is exclusive, of course, of in recent years, the exterior upgrades, where each housing unit, each living unit, the High Point, Pinecone, the Lodge, and Gamble, all voted themselves a special assessment so the exterior could be improved. And it's a little different feel when you vote a special assessment on yourself rather than having the board vote a special assessment on you. So we've really tried hard over the years to avoid having to go to special assessments to fund things.
Joe, we still can't.
Yeah, Joe seems to not be with us.
So Eric,
Check your phone.
with So if I'm looking correctly at the spreadsheet, if you look at this, at the amount of funds, the subtotal 2026, it's $2,780,000. And we currently have 820. Is there a plan? Do y'all look at how much you're gonna be adding each year versus subtracting? And is there a budget or a target on how much fully funded that you want to be? And also, what do the lenders require for the funding level of the reserves? And
Okay.
Go ahead. I know Eric's not currently a board member, so he
Yeah.
can only guess what the board will do. But you've got the long history. How would you respond to that, Eric?
Well, again, the policy that the board has adopted, so this is the board has to live by their own policies. It says that we will fund those through our assessment setting process. I moved off the board, as John says, last September. I don't want to speak to how the board intends to deal with the next 3 years. Jerry is wearing that hat at the moment. So if you don't mind, I'll pass the rest of the question to Jerry.
all right, thank you.
Are you with us, Jerry?
I am, but unfortunately, I could not hear the question from the audience. Somebody restate it, maybe I can speak to it.
Okay, we're looking at the 5-year at the spreadsheet, and I believe it was out 5 years.
Actually, it says 4 because
Okay,
it goes out to 2026, the first page.
so looking at out to 2026, it's being observed that the capital expenditures between now and 2026 exceeds $2 million,
It's almost 3 million.
almost 3 million. How is the board intending to fund those activities? This is something that would have been dealt with in September's board meeting in the budget setting
But
process.
I guess I don't want to put you on the spot as to how are you going to do it. I guess my question was, is there a target each year of what percentage of the reserves you target?
But again, the policy says that the board will develop a plan over a 3-year horizon to adequately ensure reserves are available. So that's the policy.
And has there ever been an external company that did the reserve study, or has the reserve study always been done?
It has always been done internally. It's for 2 reasons, and that's another big decision the board's going to have to make. Historically, we felt we had an on staff and young gentleman who knew everything about this property, and Dave Dunn, and Dave went out and got estimates for things in terms of replacement cost. He didn't necessarily know what it was going to cost to replace an elevator, but he went out and got bids. At this point, we don't have an in-house maintenance staff, and I'm not sure how the board intends to continue the long-term asset replacement schedule. It may be an outside party. Jerry, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. So as Eric just said, historically, our property manager who has had his hands in everything on property in terms of our assets need to be replaced. And for many years, that was Dave Dunn, would in fact get those estimates that we could build our plan looking out to a horizon 5-10 years down the road or more. The last time that spreadsheet that was just shown to you was updated was within the past year, and it was done by our previous property manager who is no longer with Taco. Currently, we do not have a property manager who would be the person who would normally work up any corrections or modifications to that spreadsheet, that long-term asset replacement spreadsheet. So it is a bit of an issue. Now, fortunately, we have some access to Dave Dunn, who, in my opinion, was the best that there ever could have been to do that job. And I'm thinking that we may need to consider asking him or designating somebody else who would do the legwork that would need to be done for all of the assets that we have on property that we need to replace periodically.
Yeah, and if I could comment, and I'm sorry, was there a comment, Gary?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, well, I also wanted to say that the figures on that spreadsheet are not chipped in stone. And if you look ahead the 4 years and see 3 million, nearly $3 million, that in fact could happen, and how the board would have to figure out how to do it. On the other hand, I don't know that all those things will happen in the next 3 years. Eric, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn and speaking incorrectly, but don't we have some flexibility in when in fact things can occur?
Of course, yeah. I mean, for example, a classic example is the elevators. Dave Dunn, in conjunction with an outside inspector and the elevator company itself, the elevator manufacturer, took a 40-year asset and stretched it out to 45 years by putting in additional maintenance. But we did that, and we put it in the plan every year as we did that inspection, and we realized, yes, we can squeeze one more year out of it. So it's a living document, and yes, it certainly can be amended based on facts and the judgment of the board.
Sure, and let me add, just also, we also had that situation with roof replacements. We had targets, but those targets they shift based on up year-to-year reevaluations of the remaining life of these assets. So those figures that you see in that spreadsheet, they are very fluid. They move quite a bit year to year.
I think the most important thing to note here for the candidates and for any owners that are participating is that the board is cognizant of this need. Quite frankly, we have a debt of gratitude to Eric, who at one point, I think finally decided that he was tired of seeing audit exceptions. Because every year for several years, every year we were basically told, okay, you guys are doing a good job, but hey, you don't have an asset replacement as the law requires. So we were remiss for quite.
Is it also a mortgage funding issue here in Colorado? In some states, they will look for a percentage of funding, fully, how much funding you have versus your 5-year plan in order to grant mortgages.
The answer is yes. There historically, if you want to have 30-year fixed rate government purchasable type financing, which we have recently achieved.
Yeah.
We've had 30-year financing, but normally it's only been through Durango institutions. They have many requirements. We have met all those requirements, and that was something that Scott Gillen worked very hard on for many years. Actually, Scott was on the board for 6 years, and I think on and off for 6 years, he was working to get us to 5 years, because in the last year of his term, we really got fully into that 30-year financing. Now, I understand Fannie and Freddie have changed the rules again, but that's as far as I know, we're still qualified for that.
I think it's important. This isn't a budget.
Oh, no.
And so since it's not a budget, there is flexibility. Anything that has this many zeros, you've got flexibility.
Yes, to move forward or backwards. Dave and I, for example, looked at crude oil prices and said, rather than wait an extra year,
Sure.
oil's cheap. Let's go ahead and put the asphalt down this year.
There's flexibility, but this is one thing that an intelligent owner, intelligent person would look at before they bought something, is the status of reserves.
Well, and I would say this, I was going to put this in my little speech, but John mentioned a little bit of the history. All of us, all the owners here have special gifts. You wouldn't be here if you had some success in life. There are people who understand exterior painting. There are people who can understand roofing. My calling in life was more in the financial area. I knew how to read a financial statement. As John said, I kind of got tired of seeing a financial statement that said Taco was not complying with the law. Didn't say it quite that bluntly because accountants are, they're a little bit circumspect, but that's what it meant. And so I decided to run for the board. And so bringing it back to our meeting tonight, for those that are considering service either on the board or on committees, think about where your gifts are, where your interests are, and bring those skills. Somebody out there is a great person that knows a lot about roofs. Be in touch with the board because that's the next big issue we have going. We need those kind of contributions from our owners.
Hey, Gary, did I see a question?
Yes, Dan Noonan is asking, were all the planned capital expenditures planned for 2020 and 2021 actually spent? If not, are they funded now for 2022, or were those funds into our capital replacement funds? Finally, what changed in those projects that they were not funded?
That would be an excellent one for Joe to address. See if he, any chance.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Joe.
I think I came back on when I logged off and logged back on. I don't know when it happened. Oh, when I took the headset off, maybe there was a problem with my headset. I don't know. What was the question again?
Dan, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, wait a minute. I know what the question was. What I would ask is what specific items in the yeah, you said 2021, 2020 and 2021 maybe. I don't recall what items were there. I know the elevator projects that were in that plan for 2020 and 2021, those got done. That got done.
Right.
So what other projects might have been designated there that
And we had the smoking hut, for example, we finished that. We had the storage underneath. We had the redoing of the offices. Those are the ones that I know got done. But I wouldn't be surprised, Dan, if one or two were postponed and or canceled.
the thing I would point out is
Were they part of this?
No.
the thing I would point out is that bear in mind that this particular spreadsheet, this plan hasn't been updated now in 2 years, and it's probably a candidate for a revision now.
Yes.
If I may, the reason for bringing up the question is we had COVID, we've been backlogged, we've now had changes in our maintenance team. So I just want to make sure that the board is looking at the fact that maybe some things got missed in our capital replacement for 2020 and 2021, and now we're into 22. We don't know who's keeping an eye on all of this. So I'm just kind of bringing it up for conceptual discussion to make sure that we're staying on top of what we said we were going to take care of in the past years and the years that we're in now and the years to come.
Well, thank you, Dan. I think that's probably a question or a comment more appropriate for a board meeting than an education session, so to speak. And I think the board is well advised to consider your point of view. Eric, do we have anything more to talk about in terms of the asset replacement program?
I think that the thing that I would like to emphasize, John, is the linkages. This starts at Kiowa. This is a Colorado state law. The board, somewhat late in the game, but did pass a policy in 2013. We're almost 10 years into that program at this point. And I think the program has worked very well. We do have a spreadsheet that is available for all owners to look at. And we update it periodically. and it has major assumptions in it, and obviously those assumptions can be wrong. We can have something happen and need to be replaced sooner than anticipated or later than anticipated, but it's still a plan that's a working document that helps the board think about how to raise the capital to make those things happen. The goal again is to avoid any kind of special assessment.
And we have been successful at avoiding those so far. So, okay. I'd like to move on to the third or another section of the document that we're looking at tonight about TACO records and management of records. And as the association secretary, I bear particular responsibility in that area. And I guess I feel at times owners themselves, but probably more importantly, board members. And so I'm addressing the two of you that are prospective board members in terms of what is the question of what is an official association document. And quite frankly, it's just about everything. About everything that comes before the board. Certainly all of the actions that the board takes by legally have to be done in open meeting. And also communications on these items that are before the board are essentially official documents. So while we sometimes feel that we can say or text or email anything we want to do, and that should be considered our private communication, as board members, when we're discussing the association's business, there is no such thing as, for instance, there is no such thing as a private email. So I think it's very important as you come in as board members to realize that, you certainly have opinions and certainly probably can express them at your home with your spouse or whatever freely. But once you step outside the role as a private individual and are representing the association, everything you say in public, and of course everything you say in writing, is subject eventually to review. It's called duplication and inspection. So an owner has every right to request any association document and has the right to inspect it, has the right to have it duplicated. On the duplication issue, we don't do that for free, because we've had in the past situations where owners have wanted voluminous copies, and we charge a fair price for copying many pages. So I just wanted to emphasize that because I think it's important to remember that as you ponder your responsibility as a board member. Any questions about that or comments from other board members?
John, I would just add that there is one small exception to that, and it's called the client attorney privilege. And we don't need to get into that. I think you can pretty much all imagine what that involves. If you wanted to get into the board's communications regarding a personnel matter, for example, that involved attorneys, those are not reviewable.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And that is true. And if you read the Kiowa and you look at the topics that can be discussed in executive session, those are topics that are excluded from the ability to review, to copy and review. And that kind of goes back to a topic of the first session, and that is, it's so important for board members to understand that confidentiality in executive session is extremely important. And so that may seem obvious, but that sometimes people have not used good judgment, and not just at Taco, but in other official capacities. And you just cannot be too careful in the kind of what is said outside of executive session. Any other comments on that?
On a less formal basis, on the committee minutes and agendas, I keep those, but I've also forwarded them to you. Are you good with that process?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what you should be doing. And again, those are reviewable. So any minutes of the board meeting, any minutes of a committee, a subcommittee of the board are all subject to inspection and copying by any owner at his or her request. As it should be. I mean, all of our business, I mean, we are spending owners' money. We are making decisions that affect them. So it absolutely needs to be transparent. And I know that we are not a city government. In other words, we're not a public nonprofit, but really the responsibility and the fiduciary duty of a private nonprofit corporation board is virtually identical. So I think sometimes thinking of Taco as the association's city council is not a bad analogy. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, just finally, the last thing that was written about in the board functions is the question of who supervises the Taco staff. And I think, and I'd certainly be interested in Eric's opinion or Joe's or any other board member, but I've really never been associated with another organization where a board is so intimately, has been so intimately associated with the day-to-day operation of the organization and the property. And part of that is that I think we have, over the years, we have not employed, in general, we have not employed a professional property manager in the sense that of some HOAs in other circumstances, where there's like a chief operating officer that reports directly to the board. We have been very intimately, over the years, the board has been very intimately associated with the day-to-day operation. However, one thing that we have attempted to do is not to have too many chefs. And so the way we've handled it informally is that the liaison between the staff and the board has been the president of the board. And we've encouraged board members to go through the president if a complaint is raised or something is observed, rather than having 7 people out there telling employees what to do or speaking to disgruntled owners or something like that. We have tried to funnel this all through the president. And I think we've had a fairly good, I think it's worked fairly well. And I guess I would be interested in Eric's view, and if Joe is still with us, because they've served as president and had that responsibility.
Well, when I was president, first coming in 2006, I assume y'all can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. When I was president, came in 2006, the scenario that John described, where the board was a hands-on board and was really involved in day-to-day operations, was much more present. It was much more the paradigm that we were working with than it is now. I think now We've tried to push back from that as best we could. We hired what we thought was a property manager 18 months ago actually 2 years ago. And he didn't work out. And then we hired another guy, Tim Broren, who recently resigned. But in the meantime, we came to realize that we had someone working for us who had all the skills of maybe not a traditional property manager, but a general manager, and that's Elisa Oliger. And she now has the position of general manager of Tamaron of the HOA. And so pretty much the rest of the staff reports to her. And the board, I believe at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, board members, pretty much funnel any communication that they want to make to staff through Elisa. And if I'm wrong on how that's happening, I believe that maybe we should push it towards that paradigm.
Eric, do you have any comments on this?
No, I think you've described it correctly, John. I think two things that we need to kind of bring into focus is our board's interest in managing the financial affairs of the association. What little work we have done to find a GM who in fact is qualified in every aspect of the association's business, from HR to construction to legal. That is a salary that the board has not been willing to pay. And secondly, we don't think there's somebody with that kind of scope very often willing to move to Durango. And so the board has tried to chip in and complement. There's some areas that Dave Dunn would tell you, I don't really want to be involved in that. I think there's some that Elisa would tell you, I don't think I want to be, that's not my area of expertise. And so it's been a compromise that we've kind of gotten to the operating style that we have. I know the board, and I was part of that process of saying, well, we'd like to start to push more of that onto the staff, but we're not there yet. At least we weren't last September.
And I guess I wanted this discussed because the two of you that are running for the board who are here tonight, it is kind of a hands-on board. And I think it's fair to say that if you want to be on the TACO board, it's not a cushy job where you just meet every now and then and the place kind of runs by itself. So I think it's only fair warning that if you get elected to the board, there is an expectation that you're going to pitch in and become part of the team. Well, I think we've covered the topics for tonight, but I would certainly be interested if anybody has any questions or comments about any of the topics covered.
A question about a committee that's shown on the website. And the committee is the TACO Future Organizational Structure and Succession Plan. And it kind of follows what I'm talking about. But this, the document that's on the website doesn't have any dates on it. So I'm curious, since y'all are talking about general managers and those types of folks, is this committee still going, or is this future, or is this past, or how does this fit into the discussion that y'all just talked about?
Did you hear that, John?
I really didn't.
Well, they're being asked, there's a committee referenced on the TACO board website dealing with
Future organizational structure and succession plan.
future organizational plan and succession plan. And the question is that committee alive? Is it working? Does it have a mission statement? Who's on it?
I am not aware of who is on that, and I don't know when that got there.
Recently.
There's no dates.
Barry, you put it there. How did it get there?
This has been here for quite some time. In fact, ever since I first put the committee's page together, So I'm gonna say this is 7 years old, 6 years old, something like that. And this was given to me, and I can't remember who it was that gave it to me, and I just put it on the website. And this is one of the things I've sort of talked to some people on the board about, the whole committees page. I think we need to revamp that and get some more information on that page about what committees are in place, which ones are active, and which ones are not.
We don't have any attribution as far as who wrote this.
I do not. What
Okay.
you see is what I've had.
Okay, well,
Explorer and Susan.
can anybody enlighten us about, I do not recognize it.
John,
I don't recognize it.
I don't recognize it either, but I do seem to recall that we did have some discussions about whether the structure of the staff and the association was going to continue the same way that it was when we were thinking about different people retiring and not being available long-term. But I don't ever remember this creation of this particular document.
Yeah,
the
nor do I.
mission Statement.
John, I think that's a product of Scott. That is the team that was put together. You served on it to.
Did I?
No, I think you and I were both on there as well.
Okay. Okay.
It even makes reference to considering an outside professional HOA management company. So that has to be within the last 3 to 4 years.
All right.
One of those exist in Durango?
Well, thank you for asking. And I think that's something the board probably should address. And I think Gary makes a good point that
Oh, yeah.
if there are obsolete items on the web, on the web page, we should either act on them or get them off.
Well, it's interesting. The organizational structure is still evolving. So as of 4 or 5 months ago, so, in a sense, it should continue to serve our board's needs, I would think. We just need to staff it.
Yeah.
Nobody doing it.
Because you got to fall, right?
What's that, Eric?
You got a staffing milestone this fall.
What do you mean?
What you're going to do about the maintenance staff?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, right now, we're in a, as I understand it, I'm not sure I have the latest information, but we have, I believe, a 6 or 7 month, we're in the midst of a 6 or 7 month contract with a company to perform maintenance because we ended up without a maintenance director. So the board will have to address that issue, I think, by the end of October.
I don't see
Okay.
any questions here, John.
What's that?
I don't see any other questions in the room.
Okay. Well, appreciate everybody's involvement and we'll have one more of these and I guess we'll do this finish it up a week from today at 7 again and look forward to seeing you all then.
Thanks, John.
My daughter had